Good morning. I am Marilyn Martin, president of Encore Learning. We're about to start our class preview, but let me take a moment to reflect on the news of the day, the tragic plane crash last evening here in our hometown. We wish all those affected well and the strength to carry on from this dreadful loss. It is once again great to join you for the spring preview of Encore Learning's 45th semester, a chance to explore, learn, and connect with others. In this very complicated time of many new issues and challenges, we hope some of our classes might help sort through some questions raised. I'm very excited about our offerings for this spring. We have 36 courses, 26 of which are new. Many, 19, will be in person. Another 13 will be virtual, and 4 others hybrid. As we go through the presentation today, it might be good if you have your catalog because the presentation will follow the order of the classes as they're listed. You can either use your hard copy or do it online, but I think it will be helpful as we go through. As I said, we'll have different types of classes, hybrid, in person. There will even be a couple of classes which are outdoors. So no matter your preference, get ready to sign up for the spring. A quick note about virtual classes. If you find a virtual class you want to take, and you and many others are still feeling your way on computer webinars, we're available to assist, and we can help get you comfortable using Zoom before your class. There are also Zoom resources on our website to assist, but feel free to reach out if you need more personalized help. And while talking about virtual classes, this is a good time to remind everyone that we'll also be recording several of our courses, 9 so far planned, to be available for members to view later. We'll reference those classes as we proceed as well. Online course registration will begin on Monday, next Monday, February 3rd at 10 o'clock. At that time, all courses online and the catalog will go live and be ready for sign up. Classes that you choose, that you click on, will be displayed with a link that says register now. If you click that link for any class or classes for which you want to register, the website will then guide you through the rest of the registration process. And again, if you have any trouble, contact us at info@encorelearning.net and we can assist you with registration. As mostly you know, some of our classes are very popular. So when you click to register, you might be informed that a course is full and you're on a waiting list. Please don't get discouraged by a waiting list. Course capacities are determined by the instructors and space availability and can change over time. Capacity could be increased if that works for the instructor and the locale. Also, people may change their own selections, changing the waiting list, and so being on a waiting list does not mean that you will not get in. And while registration opens on Monday, the 3rd of February, you can register anytime after Monday as well. Monday's the official startup date, but many courses will have availability all the way up to their start date. We're about to launch our previews, but first let me do a quick shout out to the many teams that make our classes possible. Committee chairs and volunteers from academic programs, publications, membership, class aides, volunteer, and information technology. Without the great work of these volunteers, we would not have these terrific courses for spring. While all of our volunteers make it happen, let me name the backbone of our program, the members of the Academic Programs Committee. Without these individuals who find topics, instructors, and develop and work to create the courses, we would not be having a spring preview. So a big thank you to the chairs, Jean Labella and Deb Sparrow, and the members, Tom Adams, Uta Bowman, Susan Bornstein, Mary Kay Davis, Peter French, Catherine McCormick, Ed Rader, Marge Senior, and Wendy Swanson. And a quick reference to the Carol Fuller. Carol, moving on to class aides, also did double duty by also working with academic programs. So thank you to many. And while we're talking about class aides, if you think you might want to be a class aide, we still have some vacancies. Being a Class A gets you a chance to interact with the instructor. Also, our instructors have found our Class A's to be very helpful, and they really like the fact that we provide them. And it's a great chance to interact with our folks. But thank you to everyone who makes this possible. You do a superb job. Our preview this morning will be brief videos from our instructors describing their classes. We'll commence momentarily and take a break at about 10:30, 10:40 for about 10 minutes. The final course video descriptions should end about 11:30 when we'll entertain any continuing questions. We plan to finish around 11:45, but should you not be able to tune in for the whole time or the entire presentation, these preview videos will be available after today, tomorrow morning on YouTube. They'll also be available through the catalog. If you go and pull up your course that you're interested in and click on it, you'll be able to see the presentation there as well. So enjoy today, but you may have some friends who want to know about it. You may want to review. But now enough commentary. On with the preview. Hosting our preview program today are, as I said, the two fabulous leaders of Academic Program Committee, Jean LaBella and Deb Sparrow. And they'll introduce each segment. I'm glad you could join us this morning and really hope you enjoy these previews. Jean and Deb, let's start the program.
Thank you, Marilyn. Jean and I are so happy to be helping you walk through these videos. This is a slide just to give you a summary list of the classes that are being recorded this spring. There may be more, but these are the ones we know today. And they are virtual classes, and some may be hybrid. But you can watch these videos, the recordings, anytime after. And we will also mention these again because this is super popular. Now, before we get started, just a warm welcome from Jean and me. And for those of you who have not been through one of our previews, as Marilyn mentioned, these are short 3-minute clips from the instructors, so you get a sense of the class, and they will really help you decide whether this is the right one for you. And then you'll end up with too many classes, and you'll figure out how to make them work in your schedule. So now we'll start with Jean and the first area we're going to cover.
Thanks, Deb, and thank you everybody for joining us this morning. Just one point on the recordings. Those recordings are available to anyone who enrolls in the course. So if you're like me and you have a lot of travel and you can make it to only half of the courses or all but one, you have an opportunity to take the course on your own rather than during live time. So that's nice. We only record courses when the instructor agrees to have the course recorded. The recordings for our spring courses will be available to registrants in each course up through June 30th. Enough of that. Let's take a look at our first set of video messages from our instructors. And we'll first hear from instructors who are teaching courses in fine arts, theater and music, and in health and wellness.
Hi, I'm Dee Oland, and I will be teaching Theater Appreciation for Encore Learning in spring 2025. I like to think of this class as the educated audience, which is a term that we use in theater for helping to enrich audiences' experiences of what they see and experience during a show. This will be the 15th year that I've taught this class for Encore Learning, and every time we do different shows. The basic structure of the class is that we read plays, we talk about them on the page, then we all go see the plays all on our own, and we come back together and we talk about them on the stage. We talk about things like production concept and design choices, and we basically develop a toolbox of ways that we can think about and critique what we're seeing in the theater. Every time I teach this class, we have students who have returned many times. We have students who are brand new to the class. We have great discussions. Basically, we will go wherever the students in the class want to go in terms of the discussion. Sometimes I can get guest speakers. This time around, we will be doing 3 shows. The 3 shows are In the Heights at Signature Theater, Uncle Vanya at Shakespeare Theater, and Fake It Until You Make It at Arena Stage.
Hello, I'm Ilse Bush, and I will teach a course on the history and art of ballet. As a student, a performer, a teacher, and an audience member, I have been connected with ballet for most of my life. In the Washington, D.C. area, I taught ballet technique at local studios and George Washington University for 20 plus years. I've also taught versions of this course at other venues for 5 years. In this course, I will provide information and show numerous videos that will give you a perspective on and familiarity with all that you see on stage when you watch a ballet. We will start with examining the various and often surprising events in history that have had an important role in developing ballet, beginning with the troubadours of Spain and southern France, then the establishment of the Italian Renaissance courts, the emergence of Louis XIV as King of France, and the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo, and finally the transfer of ballet from France to Russia in the 19th century. But this course is not just about history. We will delve deeply into the technique that is specific to ballet and its movement vocabulary. We will see how this technique and vocabulary have evolved over time as dancers became more skilled and as choreographers were influenced by and integrated into their productions other forms of dance, such as modern dance, jazz, and hip hop. We will also look at contemporary videos that reflect this evolution. We will examine factors other than the dancing itself that are critical to and certainly increase the impact of ballet, such as the music, the patterns formed on stage, and stagecraft of costumes, scenery, and lighting. I encourage class members to share their questions, their views, their knowledge, and their own experiences with ballet to enrich our conversation. The day after every class, I will send out an email with a brief summary, an outline of what we covered at the previous class, and also links to the videos that we watched to the extent that these videos are still available online. I look forward to meeting you.
Hi, everybody. My wife recently suggested that I try a course that combines 2 things I really like, Bible studies and music. You may know that I've done a lot of Bible courses for Encore Learning on the prophets, heroes and heroines, saints and sinners, curses and blessings, things like that. But I also like just about every kind of music, Bach, Mozart, Johnny Cash, Perry Como, not sophisticated, but very, very broad. So this course is going to feature a huge amount of really good musical performances from all over the spectrum. Symphonies, operas, oratorios, pop and country music, Western, and then Broadway musicals, popular ballads, all those things. Each one is going to be related to a Bible story, of course, but there will be less emphasis on the Bible story and much more on the beautiful music. Here are some examples. Jesus Christ Superstar, Joseph and His Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Godspell. Remember Louis Armstrong, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the saints go marching in, them bones, we'll have them all. And Bach, many famous Bach pieces, but we'll do Matthew's Creation and selections from his Passion. Berlioz, César Franck, Stravinsky, Mendelssohn, Mozart, Andrew Lloyd Webber. We'll have all kinds of examples of their music related to Bible stories. Great oratorios by George Friedrich Handel. Maybe you didn't know this, but Handel wrote a large number of oratorios about famous Bible heroes, many of them tragic heroes. We'll look at several of them. Deborah, Susanna, Judas Maccabeus. Remember in Judas Maccabeus, there's that famous march called the Conquering Hero, which you probably have seen in parades and other big events. Jephthah, the tragic story of Jephthah. And of course, selections from the Messiah. And we're going to have oldies but goodies, popular songs, Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds. There is a Season, Frankie Lane's Jezebel. You remember that song? If ever a pair of eyes promise paradise, deceiving me, grieving me, leaving me, well, we'll do that too. Now, I don't want to give the impression that this is going to be a hootenanny, just a bunch of music. We will seriously discuss the Bible stories involved. It's just that we're going to be mostly featuring the great music. I've collected a very large amount of really great stuff that we're going to enjoy watching and listening to. So even if you're not too interested in the Bible, I think you'll enjoy this course because we're going to be featuring nothing but the most famous and entertaining and beautiful musical works, and the hits will keep on coming. I do hope you can join me.
Hi, everybody. Nan Morrison here. I am delighted to tell you I'll be teaching a course this coming spring, 2025, The Horse in Art. It's called Saddle Up, The Horse in Art. And we're going to take a wonderful journey chronologically through Western art, looking at equestrian images. It is just incredible what has been done when you think about the contribution of the horse to Western civilization. In the past, it's really hard to imagine our world without the use of the horse, and you think about their contribution. So artists have documented that through the centuries, as early as the cave paintings in France, whether you want to look at the Bayeux Tapestry, from the medieval period in France, the Renaissance masters of equestrian statues like a Donatello, a Verrocchio. You move forward and you've got the incredible George Stubbs from England that's fascinated with the anatomy of the horse. And of course, the closer you get to modern times, Degas is going to take the image of the horse and just completely, the guy is completely seduced with horse racing, and it shows. He was either painting about the ballerinas or horse racing in a very big, important way. And his work's going to show the influence by the 19th century of photography. My passion about the horse is deep. I owned a magnificent quarter horse for many years. And to be honest, riding on the Manassas battlefield is one of the biggest joys of my life. And great memories. And it really prompted my long, over 30 years of studying art history to really focus even my master's thesis on equestrian statues. So I think it will be great fun. It will be chronological. It will be Western art. And it should be a wonderful focus just to learn about art history. We'll look at Romanticism and the early antiquity pieces. And our last session will be meeting in Lafayette Park. And we'll actually go look at some incredible bronze statues in Washington, D.C. So I hope you can join me. This will be my 9th course of teaching for Encore, and I want you to saddle up and join me. Thanks a lot. Hope to see you in the spring. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome. My name is Sally Wiley, and I invite you to join me for several sessions beginning in April on planning for change, loss, and new beginnings. Planning for change, loss, and new beginnings. I'm going to draw on my experience as a federal government employee for the last 40 years, hard to believe. For 40 years, I have served as a lead trainer, where I try to incorporate all kinds of strategies and interesting techniques and exercises to engage you, the audience, the participants. I've also served as a facilitator, a manager, a change agent. I am a certified coach. So I have worked with staff at all levels and across different agencies. I've also worked with retiring military officers who are transitioning to the private sector. And as a volunteer with hospice, I support inpatient care and working with families and the patients as they go through difficult times. Well, all of us, regardless of age, we all deal with constant change and uncertainty and turning points in our life on a daily basis. Some change we initiate, some we do not. Some comes at us out of the blue. And when it does, we have a choice. That's the key, how we choose to react and adapt and adjust. Planning is a very critical part of making those choices so that your life can be what you want it to be. And in planning, I would ask you, how many of you today have your personal affairs in order? I mean, really in order. A one-stop shop, I call it, so that if something happened to you today, someone else could step up without skipping a beat and handle your affairs. And what about, do you have a plan in place for your legal affairs? Are they in order, your legal documents? Have you thought about plan for the medical care that you want, your end-of-life wishes, those final arrangements? Are all of those in place? And have you had those discussions with your loved ones? Also, we must think about legal considerations. And then we think about, what about going through loss, which can take all forms, and grief, getting through what you're going through, but then moving on with new hope, renewed hope, new opportunities, so that you embrace life with gusto every day. So we will talk about tools and methods to do that, and we will share with each other. I am so excited to looking forward to working with you in April, so the entire class can share with each other, enlighten each other with insights, exercises, with creativity and confidence, knowing that you are prepared. Thank you so much. I'll see you in April, and we will have fun doing it, exploring together. Thank you.
After teaching our respective first classes during the fall term, I'm excited to be joining forces with Peter Joyce for what should be an interesting and fun class. With my background in teaching psychology and promoting well-being, and Peter's extensive experience in education and policy, we bring a unique blend of insights into how happiness can be cultivated in the encore years. Happiness in the encore years is not just a luxury, it's a necessity that profoundly shapes the quality, purpose, and longevity of our life. These years, often marked by transitions such as retirement, an empty nest, physical changes, present an opportunity to define priorities and invest in a life well lived. This 4-week class will begin by exploring the concepts of happiness in later life. We'll look at what we know about the importance of social connections, community engagement, and meaningful relationships for happiness in later life. This will include strategies for strengthening existing relationships and making new connections. We'll also explore creative outlets, volunteering, and mentoring as pathways to life purpose. We'll present practices for mindfulness and gratitude that foster a positive outlook on aging and life changes. This course is designed not only to teach about happiness, but to help participants actively integrate meaningful practices into their lives through engaging presentations, activities, and guest speakers. It will be a lively, interactive series for anyone interested in navigating this stage of life with renewed purpose and joy.
Okay, that was really interesting. And now we're ready to move on to something completely different. Our history section. And you can see we have a lot of really fascinating classes, so let's take a closer look.
Hello, my name is Carl Van Newkirk, and I'd like to talk to you about the course on Arlington history that I will be presenting in the spring of 2025. I've been teaching this course for a long time, but one of the things that I particularly like about it is that every year I find something new to talk about, and so the course is never exactly the same from year to year, and this year is no exception. Another thing that I particularly like about it is that each session of the course is taught in a different historical location in Arlington County. We will begin with a visit to the newly renovated Arlington Historical Museum. And our second session will be a visit to the secret hideaway of a silent film star. We will then visit the oldest house in Arlington. It's a log cabin that was built in 1743. And we'll talk about the daily life of a yeoman farmer in the 1700s. We then will visit the Arlington House, and in particular, we'll focus on the renovated slave quarters. And we're going to be talking primarily about the way that the enslaved population and the white population worked and lived and interacted with each other. In those days, blacks and whites were definitely not separate but equal. They were not equal and they were not separate. They lived on a daily basis with each other, sometimes cooperatively, sometimes antagonistically, in a rather complex lifestyle. We'll then visit a Civil War fort, and I'm hoping that we will again have the talk from John McNair, who is the expert on the soldiers who lived in the fort and will tell us about them. We'll have a class in the Glen Carlin Community Hall, which is on the National Register and is in the middle of a historic community, probably not the oldest, but almost the oldest planned community in Arlington and one of the most successful. We'll also have a class in another planned community in Arlington, this one being built by the federal government to handle the housing shortage during World War II. And we'll conclude with a visit to an historic Black church, Callaway United Methodist. And I will ask a friend of mine who lives in the Halls Hill community and has lived there all her life. And also with her family, she was a participant in the historic lawsuit that ended up resulting in the desegregation of the Arlington schools, where Arlington was the first community in Virginia to desegregate its schools. I hope to see you all next spring.
Chuck O'Connor, and this spring I'm teaching a course entitled World War I, Its Impact on Western Culture and the Western Worldview. After more than 40 years of private environmental law practice in Washington, D.C., I returned to Georgetown University, earned a doctorate in liberal studies, and turned my doctoral dissertation into a book, The Great War and the Death of God. I've since written several journal articles on the subject and taught courses at Georgetown and for the past 10 years for the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at American University. Now, the course begins with pre-war Judeo-Christian worldview and its synthesis of faith and reason, which gave rise to modern empirical science, unprecedented technological progress, and a vibrant Western civilization. Then, World War I shattered 100 years of relative peace and caused unspeakable 4 years of human carnage. It toppled four large empires, and it spawned a brutal totalitarian regime in several countries that cast humanity adrift, strangers in a seemingly meaningless environment and universe. In this post-war turmoil, a scientific view arose that reality at bottom was just brute matter with no meaning or purpose of any transcendent nature. It was just matter governed by physical and biological laws. The secular modernists were quickly concluding that God was dead. How did post-war Western culture deal with this materialist worldview and the eclipse of God? We will look at post-war philosophy, literature, art, music, and religious thought to find an answer. I hope you'll consider joining me in this cosmic and cultural adventure.
Hello, I'm Eric Gartman. This semester, I will be teaching a class about the Civil War and Reconstruction. The Civil War was the largest and bloodiest conflict in American history. And although it has been over a century and a half since the war ended, it continues to reverberate today. In this class, we will be discussing how the country came apart in the 1850s and how the issue of slavery was the primary issue leading the Southern states to secede. We will follow the course of military operations over the 4 long years of desperate fighting through major battles fought not too far from here, including at Manassas, Antietam, and Gettysburg. We will focus on why the Union was finally able to win the war. Additionally, we will also be examining the period after the war known as Reconstruction, which decided the fate of the newly freed slaves and how views on that period have changed substantially in recent years. We will also examine how the way the war and its aftermath has been remembered and how that has changed in recent years, including why some of the very same issues continue to be political flashpoints today in the continued battles over Confederate monuments, statues, and symbols. So join me as we examine the war between the states and its aftermath. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Charles Self. I'm the instructor for Encore Learning 3079, A History of Journalism in the United States. The first newspaper in America was published in 1690. It was called Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic. It was immediately suppressed because the colonial government had not granted permission for its publication. That action reflected community values grounded in the British Empire. Just 31 years later, in 1721, James Franklin, the older brother of Benjamin Franklin, ignored that requirement for authority and published the New England Courant. It was a bold, lively literary publication that set a new standard for American newspapers and embodied a critical attitude toward British colonial values. By the 1740s, American newspapers were printing the Cato Letters, which advocated free speech and civil liberties, and by the 1760s they were printing the demands of Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty for individual liberty and a new set of community values in a new nation. Following the passage of the Stamp Act in 1765 and the Tea Act in 1773, colonial newspapers split into Tory newspapers and revolutionary newspapers. They reflected a deep crisis that raged across the colonial press about whether there should be an American Revolution to create a new nation. That crisis would lead to the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and to a new idea of community values and individual liberty and what that might mean for an independent United States of America. This 100-year pattern of community stability followed by critical questioning, then individual advocacy, and finally crisis about community values versus individual liberty would repeat itself in U.S. journalism 4 times over the next 330 years. This class will examine that cycle as it resurfaced each of those 4 times during the 18th century, the early 19th century, the late 19th century, and the 20th century. Our goal will be to discover what this recurring pattern might mean about journalism in our own time and about the future of our society. It should be a fascinating journey. I hope you'll join me.
Good morning. I'm Mike Bush, here to preview my course on how Arlington County's Ballston-Roslyn corridor has developed since 1975, over the past 50 years, thanks in large part to Metro's Orange Line. We'll see historic photos, current videos, including tunnel construction. In 1975, Wilson and Washington Boulevards and Fairfax Drive were occupied mostly by parking lots, auto repair shops, small restaurants, and tombstone makers. Was Wilson Boulevard two-way between Clarendon and Roslyn? Was Clarendon Boulevard a neighborhood street? We'll see. In 1979, Metro's Arlington Orange Line opened. New businesses and community offerings followed. Today, in 2025, those streets are lined with new apartments, offices, restaurants, and stores. The more visible projects include Virginia Square's George Mason University, where Encore Learning operates today, Ballston Quarter, Clarendon's food markets, Courthouse office towers, and Roslyn's high-rises. How did this happen? Arlington County welcomed 5 Orange Line stations separated by only 10-minute walks along the 2.5-mile Wilson Boulevard corridor. The county adapted its master plan and new transit-oriented development followed. There'll be no required reading. Outlines of class sessions and links to online material will follow each session. About me. After a corporate law career, I became Chief Real Estate Officer for Giant Food in 1985. I was responsible for building new stores like Virginia Square and expanding old ones like Bailey's Crossroads to serve growing neighborhoods. I've enjoyed 5 decades of experience in commercial real estate, shopping centers, office buildings, apartments, warehouses. Since 2011, I've served as adjunct professor of urban development in the Masters of Real Estate program at Georgetown. In 1997, I founded REAP, the Real Estate Associate Program, a nonprofit that identifies talented minority professionals and introduces them to careers in commercial real estate, an industry with less than 2% professionals of color and less than 5% of women at professional levels. Today, hundreds of REAP alums serve in executive and management roles. See you this spring.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Bornstein. I'm representing the 5 guest instructors who will be teaching the course Voices of Resilience, Arlington's Black Community from Enslavement Through Jim Crow. This course will feature unique voices on the history and experience of the Black community of Arlington from enslavement through the 1960s. It will include legacies of key figures and how the community remained resilient despite tremendous obstacles. The course begins with an overview of the experience of the Black community during this period, led by Scott Taylor. Scott is the director of the Black Heritage Museum of Arlington. During session 2, Steve Hammond, whose ancestors were enslaved at Arlington House, will lead us on a tour of the site. He'll share its complex history and the ongoing evolving interpretation for the public, which he is personally involved. During session 3, Craig Syphax, whose ancestors were enslaved both at Mount Vernon and Arlington House, will discuss the important role of Black churches, well beyond religious matters. And he'll talk about how the Black churches shaped the life of the African American population in Arlington. The last 2 sessions will examine present-day research on the impact of enslavement and Jim Crow on Arlington today. In session 4, Dr. Lindsay Besterbridge will discuss how Arlington's built environment impacted Black community development. And she'll talk about how zoning, planning, and legislative changes impacted the lives and neighborhoods of Black Arlingtonians. Finally, in the last session, Jessica Kaplan of the Arlington Historical Society will talk about the ongoing Memorializing the Enslaved project that she runs with the society that helped reveal the history of enslavement in Arlington and the partnership that's going on now with Arlington County to publicly memorialize the formerly enslaved. The first 2 sessions are field trips to the Black Heritage Museum and Arlington House respectively, and the last 2 will be held at GMU. The course will be a mix of interactive site visits, presentation, and discussion. This is an exciting opportunity to hear firsthand from local leaders in the Black community whose family members were intimately involved in this period in Arlington's history, and also to learn new research findings from those leading this research on the impact of that period in Arlington today. It should be fun, engaging, and interactive. I hope to see many of you there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tyler Anbinder, and I'll be teaching a course called The Civil War in Washington and Beyond. I taught American history, including the American Civil War, for 30 years at George Washington University before I retired from there in 2020, and since then I've been teaching with Encore Learning. This course will start with the bombardment of Fort Sumter, which kicked off the American Civil War. We'll then look at the strategy both sides decide to adopt as they face the prospect of armed conflict between Americans. The war initially becomes a stalemate as neither side is able to push the other to defeat in the Eastern Theater. Eventually, Robert E. Lee grows tired of not being able to bring the North to a defeat, and so Lee moves north into Maryland, and in September of 1862, the Battle of Antietam is fought. Lee is defeated there, and that allows Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. But the Emancipation Proclamation was several years in the making, and we'll talk about the events during the war that helped lead to the famous Emancipation Proclamation, events that without which the Emancipation Proclamation could never have been issued. We'll also talk about what it was like to live in the Confederacy, what the Confederate government was like. We tend to learn more about the government in Washington with Lincoln than we do about Jefferson Davis's administration, and we'll cover that as well. Back to the battlefield, the key events of 1863 were the battles of Gettysburg and Vicksburg, which were concluded in July of 1863. It was with the Union victories at both those battles that it for the first time seemed like the Union might win the war. During the course, we'll also talk about the leaders of both sides, both Lincoln, who we'll be discussing a lot, and Jefferson Davis as well, what their administrations were like. We'll see that Lincoln did a lot of learning on the job and grew into his lofty position, whereas Jefferson Davis, for reasons we'll discuss, never did quite as well. But there was lots of discontent in the North about the war, and we'll talk about the draft riots and the anti-war movement there. But then we'll talk about how eventually Lincoln's appointment of Ulysses S. Grant helped bring the war to a conclusion, because Grant is unstoppable and refuses to stop fighting until the Union is able to win a victory. And so we'll conclude the class with the destruction of Southern nationalism on the battlefield at Appomattox Courthouse, and what the future would hold for both the North and the South in the reunited nation. So I hope you'll enjoy the class. I'm looking forward to teaching it.
Hello, my name is Rob Albro. I'm a professor and associate director of American University's Center for Latin American and Latino Studies. I'm also trained as a sociocultural anthropologist, and for over 25 years, I've researched, written, and taught about changing political dynamics in Latin America, both local and regional, beginning with the turn of the century emergence of indigenous political power in Bolivia. Populism has a long and contested history in Latin America, but it has been changeable, taking various forms in different times and places. Authoritarian governance likewise has mid-20th century, but also colonial era roots, and remains an evident feature of political discourse and practice across the region, even in this largely democratic era. Their combination is at once a recent hallmark of the region's political scene and a continuation of a deep-seated and uniquely Latin American political tradition and experience. Each week, we will explore different dimensions of the recent history and current expression of both populist and authoritarian governance in Latin America, and their relationship. We will often highlight specific country cases in a rapid tour throughout the region, examining different variations on the theme and the underlying currents animating populist authoritarian political developments. In particular, we will seek to better understand the circumstances giving rise to the region's present populist turn. Optional, short, informative, and non-technical readings will be assigned for each unit, and I'll come prepared to frame and discuss each week's topic, often with visual accompaniments. But the course is designed as a discussion, and your questions, contributions, and insights are most welcome. Populism and authoritarianism share a long and entangled history. Taking a closer look at how this has played out in Latin America and continues to play out offers insight into comparable political developments in Europe, the United States, and elsewhere, as one critical sign of the times in which we live.
The Renaissance in Europe starts in Rome. The Northerners will tell you that the great art and architecture started up there, and it did. But before that happened, there was a literary renaissance in Rome, because after the Crusades, the Crusaders and people who were fleeing from the Islamic spread out through Eastern Europe came to Rome, bringing with them documentation and literary works from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Eventually, that kind of knowledge came into Rome through a new group of scholars who were replacing the old group of scholars that died out because of the Black Plague that came in also at the end of the Crusades. So you have a literary renaissance in Rome that goes for almost 100 years before the big artistic and architectural renaissance gets really roaring through northern Italy. When these new people who come in, they replace a bunch of people who are killed off by the Black Plague. The scholars in the universities and the monasteries are killed off basically because they live in dormitories. They sleep in dormitories and spread the plague around. And new slots open up in the monasteries and universities for the literary scholarship to spread into the Vatican. So the Vatican becomes a sponsor of the literary Renaissance. Later on, as the Renaissance goes on, some of these humanist, educated people come down from the north to become popes. The primary example, of course, is the Medici. Everybody knows about the Medici, and they become the popes. There are 3 Medici popes. They are all humanists. They are all sponsors of literature and art. And the Renaissance moves down to Rome. The artistic and architectural stuff moves down to Rome. and Rome gets filled up with art and architecture. So the literary renaissance continues, but we'll see in the course how this evolution occurs in Rome. And it'll be the first part of the course will be about the literary renaissance, and then the gradual changeover to include the art and architecture. So come take the course. We'll learn a lot. This is a very interesting course for people who are interested in history and the Renaissance and great art and architecture.
So that concludes our history section. But before we move on, I just want to mention that 4 of those classes will be recorded. And just a correction that they will be available to people who have registered for the course up through July 31st. The 4 recorded classes are History of Journalism, Civil War in Washington and Beyond, Populism and Authoritarianism in Latin America, and Renaissance in Rome. But you don't need to write any of that down because all of this is in your catalog. And now we're ready to move on to the next area. Jean?
Okay, thanks, Deb. And our next area are our courses dealing with law, politics, and public affairs, leading off with global hotspots, which is consistently our most popular course every year, and for good reason. So let's see what our instructors have to say.
Good morning. I'm Tom Adams and a member of Encore Learning's Academic Programs Committee. I and another committee member, Kathy McCormick, have put together next semester's Global Hotspots course, where 5 foreign policy experts will help us better understand some of the many ongoing crises and conflicts currently taking place in the world. The 5 speakers we have lined up are all distinguished former U.S. diplomats with extensive experience in the countries and regions that will be covered. As we reach the 3rd anniversary of Russia's major invasion of Ukraine, Ambassador William Taylor will bring us up to date on that conflict and discuss how a ceasefire and possibly a durable peace agreement might be forged. Bill is a former diplomat and military official who has served as U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine. You may remember him from his testimony before the House of Representatives in October of 2019 in the impeachment inquiry against then-President Trump. Retired Foreign Service Officer Robert Silverman, who lives in Jerusalem, will share his views on how the conflicts between Israel and those entities attacking it might be resolved and the difficult decisions that will need to be taken for durable peace agreements to be made and honored. Rob has served in senior positions in the State Department, including as political counselor in Tel Aviv, economic counselor in both Riyadh and Baku, and political officer in Cairo and Jerusalem. He was also the elected president of the American Foreign Service Association. He currently teaches at 2 universities in Israel. Ambassador Tibor Nagy will speak about what is arguably the world's greatest humanitarian crisis, the ongoing civil war in Sudan between 2 feuding generals. That war is approaching the 2-year mark and has caused over 20,000 deaths and even more injuries. It unfortunately shows no signs of abating. Ambassador Nagy will describe this crisis and the many efforts which continue to bring it to an end. Tibor has served as the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, as well as U.S. Ambassador to Ethiopia and Guinea. I might also add that he is repeating his wildly popular Africa course this coming semester, if you want more of him. Ambassador Mark Grossman, who served as U.S. Ambassador to Turkey and achieved the highest career position in the State Department, Undersecretary for Political Affairs, will speak about Turkey. A NATO ally and its only predominantly Muslim nation, Turkey plays a key role in both the ongoing Mideast conflicts and through its control of the entrance to the Black Sea, the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Mark will discuss how Turkey pursues its foreign policy goals and U.S. cooperation with it, as well as areas of disagreement. Ambassador Daniel Shields will discuss U.S. efforts to support the 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Countries as they push back on China's efforts, which are unsupported in international law, to claim the entire South China Sea as its exclusive sovereign territory. Tensions have been running high on this in the region, particularly between China and the Philippines. So I hope you'll be able to join me virtually on Zoom for these talks on Thursday afternoons, starting this March.
Hi, I'm Karen Wagner. I'll be teaching Intelligence Community 101 for the spring session. Taught it for the first time last year, and hopefully this is a new improved version. There are going to be 6 classes, 2 hours each, starting March 27th, running through May 1st, for 25 people in person only. Look forward to seeing you if you sign up. So a little bit about me. I'm a 35-year plus intelligence community professional. I started my career in the Army as a signals intelligence electronic warfare officer and went on to work for the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and on the House Intelligence Committee twice. I actually worked for both parties on the Hill, one of the very, very few people in this town who can say that. So I think I have an unusually broad perspective on the intelligence community from multiple vantage points, and I look forward to sharing that with you and hopefully correcting some of the misimpressions that you might have from reading media and watching popular culture, TV shows, movies, and things like that. So we're going to start basically by what is the intelligence community? Why does it look the way it looks? Its evolution over time. And we'll talk about the legal framework in which the intelligence community operates. And that will be a theme throughout the whole course. What are the laws governing the activities of the intelligence community, and what are the implications of those laws? We will talk about the relationship between the intelligence community and the policymaking community and how that can be challenging depending on what the differing views and goals of those communities are. And we will also spend some time talking about some of the core missions of the intelligence community that most people are aware of and interested in: analysis, collection, covert action. We will talk a little bit about counterintelligence, and we'll talk about the growing importance of cyber and how that fits into the intelligence community architecture, and how it doesn't. So that'll be an interesting conversation. And we will talk a little bit about how changing technology is affecting both the organization and operations of the intelligence community. A little bit about AI. I'm not an expert, but certainly am interested in the ramifications of that for the IC. We can have some interesting conversations about that. We will also talk about domestic intelligence and how that has changed since 9/11 and what that means to you as a citizen. And we'll end up by talking about intelligence oversight. How do we make sure that these operations are conducted within the legal framework? How well does that work? And if it doesn't, why? So I look forward to seeing you in the spring. Hope you sign up.
Hi, I'm Tibor Naj. I'll again be teaching Africa's Role in the 21st Century, which is a concentrated version of the university class that I've been teaching for a number of years at Texas Tech University. I spent 22 years in Africa as a U.S. diplomat at 8 different postings. I had the privilege to serve twice as U.S. ambassador, 3 times as deputy ambassador. And then in 2018, after 15 years of teaching, I was invited to come back as Assistant Secretary of State for Africa. So if you have an interest, current events, and want to learn more about this fascinating continent, which is going to play an increasingly important role in the 21st century, please sign up, take my class. And as I tell my students after the course, you will know more about Africa than 99.9% of Americans. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Phil Rotundi, and I'll be leading a course called Congress, the First Branch. Congress often is called the First Branch, both because of its position as Article 1 in the Constitution and because its enumerated and implied powers far exceed those of the executive and judicial branches. It also is the only branch of our government directly accountable to the people. This course will begin with a discussion of the frustrations and factors contributing to today's hyperpartisanship. We will pay particular attention to gerrymandered redistricting. We'll also look at the redistricting reform efforts going on across the country, including Virginia's less than satisfactory effort. Then we'll move on to the legislative process itself, beginning with the often overlooked but significant party caucuses that precede the convening of a new Congress. We'll see, for example, that the special procedures used in the House of Representatives last year to approve critical, must-pass funding legislation really aren't all that special. Rather, they are procedures used frequently in the normal course of lawmaking. Finally, we'll take a look at the congressional budget process and how it differs from the more familiar legislative process. And of course, no discussion of the budget process is complete without looking at the use of its most important tool, reconciliation. I had the good fortune, some would say misfortune, of a 25-year career on Capitol Hill. I served as a legislative director, subcommittee staff director, and personal office chief of staff. Subsequently, I had a second career as the political director, managing a political action committee for a nonprofit focused solely on Congress. This will be an in-person class, and I anticipate and will be encouraging much lively discussion. The class runs for 4 weeks, beginning March 18th, 12 noon to 1:30 p.m. I look forward to seeing you then.
I'm Bill Schneider, and I'll be teaching a course for Encore Learning on democracy in America, which is what I've been studying my entire life. I've been teaching at 5 universities, most recently at George Mason. And I want to talk in this course about the diploma divide, which has become a key source of political division in the United States. It's not exactly new. Donald Trump has made it stronger than ever. According to the exit polls, voters who never attended college voted 62% for Trump. 4 years college degree, that meant they voted 59% for Kamala Harris, but only 42% of voters had a college degree. And that's become a very sharp source of division in the United States that we're going to talk about in this course. The gap between college-educated and non-college voters has been growing since the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 1960s, maybe even earlier. It was apparent even in the 1950s. The story is told of a woman calling out to Democratic presidential candidate Adlai Stevenson, who was on the campaign trail in 1952, quote, "Every thinking person in America is going to be voting for you, Mr. Stevenson." And Governor Stevenson's response, "I'm afraid, madam, that won't do. I need a majority." Stevenson's supporters were widely mocked by Republicans back in the 1950s. They were called eggheads, meaning intellectuals. Now, I've found that the 10 states with the highest percentages of college graduates, led by Massachusetts, all voted for Kamala Harris. Among the 10 states with the lowest percentage of college graduates, all but one voted for Donald Trump. The one exception was New Mexico, which is the only state that's majority Hispanic voters. The state with the lowest percentage of college-educated voters it's West Virginia, right nearby to where we are right now. It's a state that's 90% white, but only 20% college-educated. And you can see the realignment of American politics, which we will be discussing in my course, by comparing the voting histories of West Virginia and my own home state, which is the state of Virginia. Virginia happens to be the only southern state among the 10 best educated states in the country. It ranks number 7. You may or may not know this, but Arlington County, Virginia, is the best educated place in the United States. And it's a solidly Democratic community, as are most of the communities surrounding it in Northern Virginia, which separates Northern Virginia from the rest of Virginia. We'll be discussing that and the diploma divide in American democracy and what kind of threat that poses to the persistence of democracy in this country. I look forward to talking to you in the course, and we'll have 6 weeks of classes during the class. Thank you very much, and I look forward to teaching this course.
Hello, I'm Karl Lankowski, and I'm offering an 8-session online course on Germany. The course title is Germany, Crucible of Europe's Future. Outside of Russia, Germany is Europe's most populous country with the continent's largest GDP. What sort of role Europe plays in the world will depend to a considerable degree on what happens in Germany. And what happens in Germany depends on developments in a number of areas to be explored in this course. The course offers a portrait focusing on trends challenging Germany's economic model, political system, and even its identity. We'll start by considering Germany's story in European history and ponder its post-World War II memory culture. From there, we pivot to an examination of its post-war polity and political party landscape. Germany's political culture is deeply entwined with the organization of its economy, which is our next stop. We continue with the impact of demographic trends and, literally and figuratively, Germany's changing face. The final 3 sessions deal with Germany's role in the European Union, the impact of reunification, and Germany's evolving foreign policy orientation. I'm also asking some other experts on Germany to join me in discussing some of these topics with you. Now a little about me. I've been a student of Germany since I started a 4-year course on the German language in 1963. In the 20 years before my retirement in 2020, I directed the State Department's European Area Studies program at the Foreign Service Institute at its campus in Arlington. I've lived in Berlin, Bonn, Constance, as well as other European cities like Brussels and Aarhus. Over the years, work assignments frequently brought me back to Germany. I've written extensively on the country's political party landscape and most recently on Germany's energy transition. After teaching international relations and comparative politics at the State University of New York at Albany and at American University, I served as Director of Research at the American Institute for Contemporary German Studies, an affiliate of Johns Hopkins University in downtown DC. And along the way, I directed the sister city relationship between Arlington County and Aachen, Germany, for nearly a decade. So, organizing courses is always an adventure in generating fresh insights. And it's in that spirit that I hope you can join me for this one on Germany. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. And if you're like me, you already have a list of courses that you want to take, which are probably more than you can practically take. Just one note that in our collection of courses in law, politics, and public affairs, Bill Schneider's course, Democracy in America Now, will be available on recording, so that if you cannot attend every single one of the class meetings, you can perhaps attend a couple and then catch the others on recording through July 31st.
Thanks so much, Jean. We're just going to take a little break from showing all the preview clips so people can take a restroom break or ask questions. We will have time for questions at the end of the previews. We're more than halfway through. We have about another 50 minutes of videos, I believe, or a little less than that. So we're just really grateful for all of you that have joined us today. We have about 170 people that have joined us online. So nice to see you all here. We did have a question about the location of classes, and I wanted to point this out that all of our classroom classes, most of them are held at George Mason University, Mason Square, which is the Arlington campus, and they're all in Van Meter Hall on Fairfax Drive. It's pretty easy to find. We're close to the Virginia Square Metro, Clarendon Metro. There's parking behind the building. There's parking at meters around the street, but it's easy to get to from metro or bus. One exception as far as those classes, we have a class at Fairlington Community Center, one class there, and then we have a few classes that are in different locations every week, the birding class and the Arlington history class. So, and then we also have a new class this semester that will be visiting different sites in Arlington, the Black history class. So all of that information can be found online in the course description information. The course catalog was printed and mailed to about 2,000 people and is available at libraries and community centers. But the most current information can be found on our online catalog, which you can find by just going to encorelearning.net. While you're there, you can check your membership status. If you're a member, you can log in and check that your renewal date is current. If it's not, you want to get renewed before registration on Monday so that you don't have any troubles getting registered. So be sure to check that you can log in and check that your renewal status is up to date. I wanted to highlight something else that is new this year. We started this in the fall, which is how course media is shared. Our instructors are kind enough to share all sorts of resources with students. It might be a syllabus, it might be readings, links, videos, and those are all preserved on a website that students who are registered for the class are provided a unique login and password for that class. And that information is available even after the class ends. So it's a new resource that we developed this fall that's using a user-friendly website and is not part of your member account. If you've taken classes before this year, that course media is preserved in your member account. So I wanted to bring that up. And happy to take other questions. If there's anything else.
There's one in the Q&A.
I see that. So we have a question. Somebody's asked if they could watch a virtual class at Mason, and we are happy to set that up. There are classroom spaces available based on request. So if you are taking a class in person, but then there's a virtual class you want to get to, you can let us know and we can arrange for classroom viewing space, and then we'll notify people in that class that is being offered. We did that for about 4 or 5 classes last fall, just based on request. And at this point, we'll offer that on request. So thank you for asking that. It's just a fantastic lineup of classes, and it's all possible because of the hard work of our academic programs committee, our publications committee, our class aides, our IT committee, the membership committee, and our volunteer chair, getting all these catalogs out and making sure you're all aware of what's being offered this spring. And so a good question about class recordings. So we have currently 9 classes that are being recorded. That means the day after the class session, the recording is available online, and you'll be provided a link to that recording. So if you missed the class, you can watch it or want to see it again. And those recordings are available on this website all the way until July 31st, 2025. So if the class starts in March, you will be able to see that recording anytime up until July. So if you want, you could sign up for a class and have summer school and watch classes later. Now, you don't get real-time responses from instructors. You can ask questions. It's great if you can participate in person, but it's a wonderful way to engage. For the fall semester, we will have recorded classes. We don't know how many. For those, they're generally available till February. So this past fall term, those classes are still available, I believe. The schedule for Global Hotspots class is posted online. If you go to the course description, it lists the dates for each of the instructors. There's different instructors every week, speakers that are just fabulous, and that schedule is online. If you need help with registration, you haven't registered before for Encore Learning, on our website, on our YouTube channel, it's linked on our courses page, but also on our YouTube channel. Easy to find. Just go to YouTube, Encore Learning. There is a video. It's called Registration Familiarization, and it's one of our most popular videos put together by Marty Saddam last year, and it still is absolutely accurate about how to register. So I recommend viewing that short, it's like a 6-minute video sometime before Monday morning if you've never registered for Encore Learning before. I don't see any other questions coming in, and hopefully people have had a sufficient break and we can continue with the next set of videos.
Okay, we're ready to get back to our descriptions of our classes with one of our larger areas, always so popular, literature and writing. So let's start listening to what's going to happen this spring.
Hi, I'm Marty Saddam, the instructor for the 6-session course, Writing a Memoir. I took this class with Encore Learning in 2014 and have been teaching it since 2017, now for the 7th time. Before, when I took other memoir classes and read many memoir writing books, I still felt as though I was missing many things I needed to know, as well as the most important concepts of storytelling and how to develop the habits and skills to write regularly and well. The same course has been taught face-to-face and virtually, but I personally believe virtual may be the most effective. In virtual, we can accomplish the same course objectives, but with the use of the Zoom breakout rooms function, we can allow for better, smaller group interaction without distraction in a classroom with the many small groups interfering chatter. I wrote and published 2 books of memoirs before I wrote a book, same name as this course, Writing a Memoir, which was mostly about the topics I wished I had learned before I started to try to publish. The book could be considered a course text and is organized into 6 short chapters with many memoir examples that are covered in the lecture portion of each class and for later reference once the class is over. The chapter sessions are Session 1, Getting Started, what memoirs are and understanding tools that can make your writing easier and more efficient. Session 2, Research, what kinds of research are required for memoir writing and how best to do it. Session 3, Storytelling. This is the core of good memoir writing. It is a skill that takes practice to make readers want to read your work. Session 4, Organizing, methods and practice for organizing source materials and organizing writing products. Session 5, Permissions, developing a process for cataloging materials and writing containing intellectual property and copyright. And Session 6, Publishing, thinking, preparing, and technical matters about publishing when you start writing, not after writing is done. Each class is 90 minutes, with half being lecture and half reading class members' short memoir stories in small groups. The real difference in this course over other memoir courses is learning how to be part of a writing group that keeps you motivated to write and allows for feedback from an interested audience. We have several writing groups that have been inspired by this course to keep writing and meeting long after the actual course ends. The oldest group having been going continuously since 2012. I look forward to having you join me in a lifelong learning and doing exercise of memoir writing in the spring.
My name is Michael Collins. I taught for almost 40 years English and American literature at Georgetown University, and I've continued to teach for Encore Learning since my retirement in 2020. The course I'm teaching is called 8 Modern British Poets, and we will look at 1 or 2 poems by each of those 8 poets. While the course from time to time will inevitably consider the context of the poems, its main focus is on the poems themselves, and the classes will be devoted primarily to a close and careful reading of each poem in order to discover what the poem says and also what the poem does, the impact that it makes on its readers because of the language that the poet chooses and because of his use of the traditional poetic techniques of English literature. While some, but not all of the poems may be difficult initially, one goal of the course is to make the work of these remarkable poets more accessible, more enjoyable, more rewarding if you go on to read their other work. The course will consist of 5 classes. After an introduction in the first one, we will begin simply to look at 1 or 2 poems by each poet as we move through the semester. The last class, or actually the last half of the last class, will be devoted to a look back at some of the issues that have been raised in the class, and also a consideration of what other poets one might have included in a course such as this. There'll be time for discussion in each of the classes. The 8 poets are Gerard Manley Hopkins, Thomas Hardy, W.B. Yeats, Wilfred Owen, T.S. Eliot, W.H. Auden, Dylan Thomas, and Philip Larkin. Gerard Manley Hopkins died in 1889, and Philip Larkin died in 1985. And so what we get is about 100 years of modern British poetry covered in the course. All the poems we shall read will be available in the course file, which participants can access once they've registered for the course. I've gathered together all the poems and put them in a single file. So if you'd like to reading some poetry, looking closely at the way poetry works, I'd welcome you to join 8 modern British poets.
Hi, I'm Jerry Hendershot. After retirement, I discovered poetry in workshops, writing, and teaching. I taught poetry courses at Ollie George Mason and Ollie American University, including ekphrastic poetry and African American poetry, courses I will teach this spring at Encore Learning. About ekphrastic poetry. Ekphrastic is a Greek word that means art in one medium about art in a second medium. For us, ekphrastic refers to poetry about paintings. Consider Peter Bruegel's painting Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. It shows a spring day in a field overlooking a bay. A farmer uses a horse-drawn plow, preparing for spring planting. He looks away from the bay, where, in the lower right corner, unnoticed at first by the viewer, a winged man, Icarus, plunges headfirst into the water, drowning. W.H. Auden's poem about the painting, Le Musée des Beaux-Arts, begins, "About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. how well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. The painting and the poem together give a greater appreciation of both. Each class will have a theme: old masters such as Bruegel, ekphrastic poems by women such as Sylvia Plath, paintings and poems about racial differences, and drawings about poems. We will discuss mostly, but I'll give background on the painters and poets. I will encourage, but not require, you to write. My other course is African American poetry. Session themes include oppression and privilege, community and conflict, and poems from prison. We will read 18th century poems such as To His Excellency George Washington by Phyllis Wheatley, an enslaved girl. Poems from the Harlem Renaissance such as Let America Be America Again by Langston Hughes. And contemporary poems such as Terence Hayes' Carp Pond about incarcerated youth. I will lecture some, but mostly we will discuss the poems. We will also be visited live by working Black poets. To illustrate, here's a poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, We Wear the Mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts, we smile. We will ask, what are the masks worn by Black people, by white people? Please join me at Encore Learning for my courses on ekphrastic poetry and African American poetry.
Hi, I'm Jenny Sullivan, and I've taught a number of literature courses for Encore Learning. In Flannery O'Connor short stories, we will look at the work of this Southern fiction writer. The stories we will discuss are Revelation, Good Country People, A Good Man is Hard to Find, and Parker's Back. O'Connor was a 20th century Georgia writer who died of lupus in 1963 at the young age of 39. A Catholic in the Protestant South, she wrote about redemption and the grace of God. But her prophets of God are on the spectrum from the unattractive to the downright grotesque. You will meet, for example, a misfit murderer on the loose in Florida, a phony young Bible salesman, a lady pig farmer with a superiority complex, a smug PhD who, according to another character in the story, ain't so smart after all. And also a man who spends all of his money getting tattoos, among many other wild and crazy kinds of characters. Mother Teresa once said that Jesus comes into her shelter off the streets of Calcutta every day in one of his, quote, wretched disguises. Flannery O'Connor said that they are all through her stories, quote, slouching toward Bethlehem to be born. Perhaps unexpectedly, her stories are often wildly funny. These characters are so far from perfect that she had a great time describing them. In Good Country People, she says that Mrs. Hopewell had no bad qualities of her own, but she was able to use other people's bad qualities in such a constructive way that she never felt the lack. When someone in O'Connor's audience at a lecture looked down his nose to ask her why Southern literature had so many freaks in it, she answered, because in the South, we can still recognize one. All of her stories are online. Just Google them. Or you might want to invest in the Library of America's Flannery O'Connor's collected works, where you'll find more stories, her 2 novels, and selected essays and letters. Her essays and letters are wonderful and give insight into her worldview and her artistic vision. I'll introduce material from them in our discussions because she speaks so eloquently and entertainingly, and her stories give you get more insight into her stories. They have more impact once you know a little bit of how her mind works. On the first day, I'll give you an introduction that includes a video of her life and work that showed on PBS. Then I will outline the order in which we will take each story, one story a week. It will be a lot of fun. It will never be dull. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope to see a lot of you there.
Hi, my name is John Fordresher. I'm a retired emeritus professor of literature from Georgetown University. It's been my great delight to teach a number of Encore Learning courses already, and I'm introducing you to a new course for March of next year, 5064. The title of the course is Reading Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. In 4 90-minute class sessions, each considering about 140 pages of this major American novel, people will talk with me either in a GMU classroom or over Zoom about 140 pages or so of the novel 4 times over. I will be making available to participants a week ahead of each session a kind of reader's guide, which will be a list of topics, issues, questions that we might choose to talk about. And of course, participants can supply further ideas, questions as each session plays through. The purpose of the course is really quite simple. We will explore a much admired American novel by an American master. That's what we're going to do in the 4 Wednesdays of March from noon until 1:30. I hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Whether appearing in biblical representations or classical drama, in 18th and 19th century narratives, or present-day fiction, the problems that ensue when plagues and pandemics emerge test the ability of the individual, the community, and the institutions that govern social order to cope with the consequences of these catastrophes. For 6 weeks, we will explore 3 modern novels that tell the stories of such widespread and fateful devastation. We will begin with Geraldine Brooks's Year of Wonders, a text based on historical fact, which chronicles what happens in a 17th century English village when the plague strikes, to be followed by Emma Donohue's The Pull of the Stars, a tale of the 1918 flu epidemic as it unfolds primarily in the maternity ward of a Dublin hospital, a pandemic, by the way, which has few literary embodiments, and concluding with Albert Camus' The Plague, perhaps the most famous fictive account of what must be done when cats disappear, rats come out to play, and people die. I do wonder if there is anything we, as readers and as members of society, might learn from these sagas.
I'm Tom Manteuffel, and the class is King Lear. On a dead, cold winter night, the night of December 28th, 1598, a crew of about a dozen men broke into a long vacant theater in the northwest London, a suburb of Shoreditch, and began to dismantle it piece by piece. 6 months later, it was reassembled into a brand new theater grandly called the Globe in the somewhat seedy area west of the foot of the London Bridge. It could accommodate an amazing 3,000 spectators, competing with the nearby Rose Theater and the bear baiting arenas and the brothels and the pubs that were already there. The resident playwright, William Shakespeare, was 35 and in mid-career. Just 2 years later, in 1601, disaster struck when the Globe and its company was involved, if indirectly, in the Essex plot to overthrow the aging Queen Elizabeth. Barely escaping prison, the new theater company's fortunes were once more devastated 2 years later when all the theaters in London were shut down by the plague in 1603. At that same time, the troupe, which had been the Lord Chamberlain's men, had lost its patron who died that year. Things looked very bleak. And it was just at that very precarious moment for the Globe that all of London was welcoming a new king, replacing Elizabeth, James I. Somehow, and it's not at all clear just how, the Globe's endangered theater company emerged that year with a new patron, none other than the new King James himself. And it was to honor their powerful new patron that Shakespeare fashioned a new play in 1605, full of parallels to contemporary London, although based on a legendary pre-Christian king. It was King Lear, considered by many, including me, to be Shakespeare's greatest work. What most interests me about this play is exactly how Shakespeare molded, changed, rewrote, and adapted the 5 or 6 sources that he used for the Lear story. As we did in my class last semester at Encore Learning on King Henry IV, Part 1, we're going to try and capture what was on Shakespeare's mind in 1605 that led to the writing of King Lear, that caused him to write it and shape it precisely the way he did. We'll also look at a few selected scenes in performance to view how modern directors and actors have interpreted this work. So, if that sounds of interest to you, as it is to me, please join us for sessions starting in March, the background to and the writing of the magnificent play, King Lear.
Hi, everyone. This spring, let's talk about stories and the women who wrote them. When short fiction first became popular in 19th century periodicals, American women found that writing stories was a respectable way to support themselves and their families, and also express their ideas and beliefs. Eventually, American women even made successful careers as authors. I'm Janet Auden, inviting you to come talk about American women writers with a new focus this spring on writers as storytellers. We all have our own opinions about what makes a good story, but what makes a good storyteller? Fortunately, I found a terrific companion for our journey. The Oxford Book of American Short Stories, 2nd edition, an affordable paperback anthology of both male and female authors. The editor, pretty famous writer herself, Joyce Carol Oates, chose some less well-known stories by well-known authors, from Harriet Beecher Stowe and Sarah Orne Jewett in the 1870s to 20th century authors like Eudora Welty and Flannery O'Connor and Oates herself, to contemporary authors like Louise Erdrich and Jhumpa Lahiri. Each of the 7 weekly classes will focus on a pair of women authors and draw on 1 or 2 male authors of the same time period for context and comparison as we go. And we'll talk about how readers influenced the stories of the time as well. The 2-hour class is entirely on Zoom, centers around PowerPoint presentations, but I encourage, in fact, I even depend on you and your participation in the chat space, with the idea of a reading circle. You can share reactions and responses with each other continuously online as we go. Come join the reading circle this spring to explore how and why these women made stories, and what they still mean for us today. I'm looking forward to it. Hope to see you.
Okay, and before we begin our last area of classes, I just want to mention that in literature and writing, we will have 3 recorded classes for people who sign up and can't make all the classes. African American poetry, Portrait of a Lady, and King Lear will all be available on recordings. And now, Jean, you want to finish us up with this last area?
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Our last segment of section of videos will talk about our science and technology courses and social sciences courses. The spring birding course, we don't have a video for that because the course has 4 different instructors, but let me just talk a little bit about that. It is a very popular course. It's one that gets us out of the house, out of the classroom, and out in nature. We're going to offer 2 sections of it. There'll be one on Tuesday mornings, beginning in late April and early May. The second one will be on Thursday morning. So you sign up for one or the other of those. The first couple of weeks, we'll go and visit the Gulf Branch Nature Center over on Military Road and the Long Branch Nature Center over on South Carlin Springs Road. We'll learn about raptors and songbirds and other birds who may just be traveling through the area because it's spring and they're going to go to a climate that they like better as the weather changes. In the 3rd and 4th weeks, we're going to grab some binoculars and we're going to go out and find these birds. And throughout the course, we're going to be guided by staff of the Arlington Nature Centers who are experts on the birds that live here and the birds that fly through. So give that some consideration. I will be in the Thursday class myself, and at least I hope. And let's hear about our other science, technology, and social sciences courses.
Electric vehicles, the future is now. With 5 million electric vehicles in the United States and 42 million worldwide, EVs are now a proven technology. They have stirred interest because of their beneficial effect on climate change. They can provide carbon-free transportation while saving 75 to 90% on fuel. In the DC area, almost 20% of new car sales are electric vehicles. I'm sure many of you have thought of an EV if you're considering a new car. In these sessions, we will discuss how electric vehicles work, what are their advantages and problems, and is one right for you? I became interested in electric cars just before the beginning of the pandemic, and have studied them from books, from articles, and from video presentations. 3 years ago, I decided to replace my 10-year-old RAV4 with an electric car, and I've now had one for over 2 years and 15,000 miles. I love driving it. There are over 50 different electric vehicle models in the US and over 100 in Europe. Prices are coming down, and in some states, like Colorado, turning in a gas clunker for an electric vehicle can generate $16,000 in incentives. However, federal tax rebates are now uncertain. The course will be given live as 5 90-minute sessions. At each, I will try to talk for about 60 minutes and leave an additional 30 minutes for questions. Specifically, the sessions will be 1, how both conventional and electric cars work. What are the differences in driving an electric car? 2, what are the various types of electric cars? There are 4 types of electrified vehicles, from simple hydrogens to hydrogen-fueled cars. How do they differ? How do they work? And what are the advantages of each? 3, we will discuss the range of electric vehicles, their batteries, and charging the car. Many EVs can go 300 miles on a charge, and the Lucid can go over 500 miles. We will discuss the different types of batteries and methods of charging electric vehicles. 4, what are the amazing safety and convenience features on the new electric cars?
Many of these features are also available on newer internal combustion engine vehicles. How do they work and why are they important? And finally, we'll discuss the economics of electric cars, how much they cost, what is the status of incentives, and a discussion of current and newer cars that may be more affordable. I hope you find this interesting and will join the in-person class.
My name is Dr. Susan Purrs. I'm excited to be teaching a course for Encore Learning called Understanding Climate Change and Solutions. The good news is that a lot of incredible innovations are happening around the world to address climate change. Many people don't know that we actually have everything we need in terms of technology to solve climate change. Regardless of what national governments do, there is also tremendous potential and action to address climate change at state and city levels. More than 12 United States, for example, have been honoring the Paris Agreement since 2017. Renewable energy is now the cheapest and fastest form of energy to produce. Climate change is an urgent concern for the United States and the world. The good news is that with technology and political will, the world can accelerate the ongoing shift from fossil fuels to renewables by reducing fossil fuels by half by 2030 to meaningfully address climate change. This is still possible, and it is recommended by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. This course will explain the causes of climate change, how it affects droughts, fires, storms, and heat, and how it leads to increased food insecurity, disease, poverty, displacement, and vulnerability for women and girls. We will also focus on climate solutions and positive actions that make a difference. The course will include short videos to illustrate current trends and course content. We will see some of the amazing innovations and solutions happening around the world to address climate change. Class discussion will include places in nature that protect us and serve as climate anchors. We will explore how climate change affects our physical and mental health. We will learn how climate change is affecting people in some of the most vulnerable areas of the world, like Africa, South America, the Pacific Islands, as well as places in the United States, like Louisiana's coastal areas, Florida, Alaska, California, and most recently, North Carolina. We will learn why it is critically important to protect the Amazon rainforest, the Greenland ice sheet, the Thwaites Glacier, and other key natural areas. Equally important is the impact on our water cycles on land and ocean currents. So my hope is that this course will inspire hope and empower participants to understand climate change and find ways to be a part of the solutions. I'm excited about teaching this course. I hope you will join us.
Hello, my name is Emmett Holman. As of June 2016, retired from the philosophy department at George Mason University, where I taught for 45 years. And I'll be teaching an Encore Learning course entitled The Mind-Body Problem and Contemporary Panpsychism. Now, the mind-body problem is a problem that arises once we start asking questions about the nature of the mind. And it's called the mind-body problem because traditionally the answers to that question have divided into two categories, depending on how they see the relationship between the mind and the body. On the one hand, there are physicalist theories of mind, according to which the mind is identical with or in some way reducible to some part of the physical body. And obviously that would be the brain and maybe the central nervous system overall or whatever. On the other hand, there are what are called dualist theories of mind, according to which the mind is non-physical
but is causally connected to the brain and the rest of the body in some way. Now, debates in recent decades over these two issues have, as many people see it at least, reached an impasse in the sense that there are compelling arguments that neither one can be true. And as a way of breaking that impasse, some people have proposed a third alternative known as panpsychism. Panpsychism, and the impasse is especially with regard to the nature of consciousness. Panpsychism is the view that mind, and in particular consciousness, pervades all of nature. And the form it takes in current debates is that the most elementary entities in nature, quarks or whatever they are conscious at a very, very attenuated level. Now, I can imagine that some of you at this point are rolling your eyes and saying, oh, these ivory tower philosophers, they come up with such crazy ideas. Who can take all that seriously? Well, okay, except that there are some contemporary scientists, neuroscientists, that think we ought to take panpsychism seriously as well. So that's what this course is going to be about. The mind-body problem and how panpsychism bids to break an impasse between the two more mainstream theories. There will be quite a bit of reading for the course, so if you want to get the most benefit from the course, be prepared to do quite a bit of reading. So that's the course. I hope to see many of you there. Good day.
I'm Dwight Rogers, and I'm offering a new 6-week course in March and April titled Wisdom of Important Texts from 5 Traditions. Because I expect the course will be more like a seminar than a lecture course, enrollment is limited to 25 and will meet in person at George Mason University Mason Square on Fairfax Drive in Arlington. I'll ask class members to become familiar with the short text of the week before class. I'll also provide some questions as the basis for our discussions. The first of the 6 weeks will try out the class approach using the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights as our focus, and ask what are the circumstances under which this text was written? How has this text been used or ignored? What is the historical significance and what has been the influence of this text? What in this text causes you concern or raises important questions? During the following 5 weeks, using similar questions, we'll discuss texts from the Hebrew Bible, specifically the section in chapters 22 to 24 of Proverbs called Sayings of the Wise, and chapter 9 from the book of Ecclesiastes, also called the book of Koheleth. Then from Buddhism, the fundamental text called the Four Noble Truths. Then from Christian Testament, the Gospel of Matthew's Sermon on the Mount. Then from Islam, the 5 Pillars, and finally, from modern humanism, the Humanist Manifesto number 3. I'll suggest how you might access these texts online as the course gets underway. The course meets on Thursdays from 10 to 11:30 from March 13 to April 17. Bring your perspective and your open mind. I found that what strikes me as both wisdom and foolishness resides in all major religious and philosophical traditions. I hope each class participant gains some understanding of the wisdom. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Janice McLean and very excited about my brand new course for Encore Learning entitled Psychology's Presence in Your Life and Today's World. Most people, upon hearing the word psychology, think pseudoscience, Freud, sex. It is so much more, and it is not pseudoscience. So in summary, in this course, we will look at how psychology impacts on your life from the minute you turn off your alarm to putting your head down on the pillow that night, and all of the institutions and influences on our lives that reflect psychological phenomena. And that includes business and industry, pre and post-COVID, the military, advertising, marketing, politics, the courtroom, the justice system, all of these settings of our everyday world. So we will start with how we learn. It sounds very dull. It is not. It is fascinating, and it enables us to hypothesize why she acts this way or they act that way by knowing a little bit more about how we may have come to interact with others or behave in a certain way. We will go on to research. Psychologists are trained researchers, and we will talk about how research is designed. We'll do a very fun exercise in class about finding the research flaw. Lots of fun, that one is, and interesting. And we will learn to ask that all-important question, who is funding the research? We will go on to talk about motivation and what motivates us and others. Typically, there are 4 motivators: achievement, power, affiliation, exhibitionism. What motivates rapists? What motivates us to have sex? What motivated Jimmy Carter to live the life that he did? We will study it. We will go on to memory, how we learn, how we forget, and we'll study courtroom cases, including those of Elizabeth Loftus, a psychologist who must travel with a bodyguard because of death threats she's gotten about her research. And then finally, we'll go on to psychopathology in individuals, but also in everyday life and in groups. The 4 Ds of abnormal behavior. What's coming in the next DSM manual, diagnostic and statistical disorders. Will it be gaming addiction, entitlement disorder? We'll have to wait and see. I teach a very interactive class. I enjoy questions. I will cover extra material if you ask me to. We'll have a speaker. We will have a lot of fun. And I hope I've motivated you to register for my course. And we'll see you in March.
Okay, just one note on the science classes, the climate change course will be available as a recorded option too, if you are interested in that and want to take it. And that's a wrap. Laura?
Thank you, Jean. And Marilyn may join me as we close out today as well. Thank you both, Jean and Deb, for hosting us this morning. Just fantastic. What an exciting lineup of classes. I don't know how people can choose what to pick. But consider some of these options for if you have classes that are at the same time and one of them's recorded, you can sign up for the recorded classes and view it later. And also know that we're willing to host classes that are being held virtually with viewing at Mason based on requests that come in. So thank you, everybody. The preview videos will be on our YouTube channel. They're getting uploaded and should be available even this afternoon. We will be sending out an email tomorrow morning with a link. So you can catch these videos. We've also recorded the entire event today. So if you want to watch the whole 2 hours, you're welcome to do that. And that'll be uploaded tomorrow and available tomorrow. Be sure to check your login, try logging into your member account, make sure that you have your password saved. If you need to reset your password, you can do that. If you need assistance, it's best to reach us today or tomorrow. Monday morning, we're very busy right at 10 o'clock. Know that when you go in to register on Monday, if you are connected to the site before 10 a.m., you'll need to refresh your browser perhaps right at 10 a.m. so that a class currently might show up as read-only, and on Monday morning at 10 a.m. it changes to register now. So if it's after 10 o'clock and you don't see register now for a course you want to pick, that means you probably need to refresh your browser. And that can be done in different ways, but just make sure you know how to do that. Or just wait till right at 10 o'clock to log in. I'm happy to answer any questions that might be coming in. I don't see anything right now. But if you have a question, you're welcome to ask it. And we'll look forward to seeing what classes are popular on Monday morning. I don't know, Deb and Jean, do you have any guesses? What's going to sell out?
Well, I think Global Hotspots it's not going to sell out because it's virtual and we can have so many registrants. I'm guessing that a lot of the literature classes are going to be popular. I'm already struggling to decide how many classes I can fit in my week. And I definitely got to make some hard choices here. Jean, what do you think?
Me too. I'm going to predict that both sessions of our birding class will probably fill up, which is great. And I agree. Well, I mean, there's just so many great things. There's at least 10 courses that I'm going to try to fit into my schedule.
Me too.
The
Anyway.
birding class probably doesn't need any further plugs, but having taken it, I can assure you it's a great course.
Certainly some of those classes have smaller, there's smaller capacity. So the birding classes are, what is it, 20? The Arlington Enslavement to Jim Crow is also a small class. So those are the ones that fill up and are worth getting into your cart if you're interested.
Pretty quickly, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Know that if a class is filling up, or there's a lot of people that are interested in picking the class at the same time, it may show as being full and putting you on the waiting list, but there's actually seats available. And you will promptly get an email from us if space is available. So if you are on the waiting list right away on Monday morning at 10 o'clock, check your email over the next hour or so, because it's very possible you've moved from waitlist to being registered for the class. It's just a shopping cart issue where a lot of people put a class in their cart at the same time, and then the system doesn't know what to do because they all clicked register me at the same time. And then we can see what time people have registered and move them up from waitlist into open seats. We also have people who register and then realize the next day that they actually can't take that many classes and have to cut back. So your spots on the waiting list can definitely move up over time, and it's worth checking your email.
And I would add, if it looks pretty overwhelming because there's so many classes that seem to be offered at the same time, double check the dates of each class because they do start and stop throughout the semester. And so sometimes you can actually manage 2 classes at the same time frame depending on the dates.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Many classes are 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and you could end up taking a class on Tuesday at 10 that's actually at different times. I did also want to highlight there's a couple classes where the course schedule changed from what's in the catalog. Catalog, we sent it to the printer in early December, and here we are almost 2 months later, and a date has changed. And so when you're looking at a class, it's great to look at it online. You can see the actual dates, you can view details of the dates, and you can also view the room locations all online. So double check those. Great. I don't see anything else, so I think we're ready to conclude the course preview today. Thank you.
And I want to thank Laura and Jean and Deb, because without you wouldn't have this wonderful presentation. And thank you to our instructors. Thank you so much.
And I also would like to thank the staff of Encore Learning, Donna, Patty, and Carrie, who worked so hard to put this all together. Thank you.
Well deserved.